This documentary is about the Black Death. The Black Death is known as one of the most deadly diseases known to mankind.
The bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, was a deadly disease that was spreading throughout Eurasia during the 13th and 14th century. It caused tens of millions of deaths. Its symptoms are fever, headache, chills, weakness, and one or more fevers. This isn't the only version of the plague.
The point of origin for the Black Death was most likely a population of rodents, small prairie dog-like rodents in Central Asia. We think Black Death originated in Asia because of what we've seen from the piece of evidence above and had on others. This is a turning point in history because of how many people died and the effects it had on people of that time. It affected the people by ending feudalism, which means dividing people into classes.
The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, is a turning point in history because of the changes in society, medicine, and economics. It also caused things like abrupt and extreme inflation. The plague has also caused a decrease in faith and religion because prayer failed to prevent sicknesses and death. The Black Plague also caused improvements in medicine, like doctors began to question genetic medicine. They relied more on observation and they paid more attention to anatomy. There were more improvements in medical ethics, public health, and hospitals. The changes in medicine meant that doctors actually used evidence and scientific methods to diagnose and cure diseases more successfully. These changes are both good and bad. We can tell that this is still true today with the aftermath of COVID going on throughout Illinois and the world.
Europe was overwhelmed by waves of the bubonic plague from Central Asia to Europe. No region or city escaped the bright colors indicating the year of the plague's arrival. The ancient Central Asia strain that caused the 1338 through 1339 endemic around Lake Isaac must have come from one such reverse. The Black Death arrived in 1338. We use this piece of evidence because it tells us that the Black Death most likely started in Central Asia. Thus, it helps prove our thesis that the bubonic plague did in fact start in Asia. So that's why we picked this piece of evidence to represent our topic and thesis.
A team of scientists took DNA sequences from modern-day plague. They got them from marmots and rodents in Central Asia, and from historical plague, including the Black Death from previously published studies. They used these sequences to create an evolutionary tree to map out the relationships between the strains and compare them to the strain from Chile Valley. The tree revealed that the Chile Valley strain was different from the Black Death strain by only 2 mutations. The researchers had dates for the True Valley strain found on in the inscriptions of the tombstones. They were able to confirm that the True Valley strain was older than the Black Death strain, and so concluded that the Black Death must have evolved from it. This piece of evidence confirms that thesis is correct that the original strain is from Asia.
The Black Death was mostly generally associated with Europe. This is not surprising since it killed the estimated 1/3 of the European population. In the 14th century, however, the bubonic plague actually started in Asia and devastated many areas of the continent as well. Unfortunately, the course of the pandemic in Asia was not as thoroughly documented as it was for Europe. However, the Black Death does appear in records from across Asia in the 1330s and the 1340s, noting that the disease spread terror and destruction wherever it arose.
The fact that 1/3 of Europe's population died of the Black Death is why people used to think the Black Death originated in Europe. Reports that came to Europe about the disease indicate that lots of Asia's population died. Knowing what happened to Europe, this was probably an underestimate, because there were more people in Asia than Europe. To pinpoint the time and place for the origin of the Black Death, researchers turned to the 14th century archaeology sites in Central Asia.
They identified 2 grave sites in Kurdistan where tombstones designated victims of the plague from 1338. They extracted DNA from the victims and found DNA from the plague bacterium Y. pitis. This evidence demonstrates that Y. pitis was in Central Asia before it reached Europe, but the researchers could still not determine that this was the original plague strain. To test the plague that they identified was the original strain, the researchers turned to a trail of breadcrumbs left in the bacterium's genome. About 20 million people die in Asia of the Black Death, so that proves that it did not just affect Europe, and thus proving that the bubonic plague could have started in Asia.
Also, the population that was lost in Asia from the Black Death is the lowest population of people who died from the Black Death. The plague could have changed over time, causing later for Europe to get worse and a worse strand of the plague to deal with.
In conclusion, the Black Death could originate in Asia because there have been sightings of marmots and small prairie dog rodents that could have spread. Also, the evidence we have found seems to in fact prove that the bubonic plague did start in Asia. The scientists have found a cemetery that buried victims of the Black Death. They had found symptoms of the plague that is Y. pitis and studied the DNA bacterium of Y. pitis. This evidence was from Asia, which made them more suspicious of it coming from there. This evidence proves that the Black Death did originate in Asia.
And these are our sources.
This is by Mia Guerrera,
Ada Mainolker,
Eliana C,
And Freda K.